Biloxi, Mississippi has a population of about 45,000 and is known for its beautiful beaches and the many casinos. This is where the story of Mississippi starts.
Biloxi was first settled in 1699, and it was settled by a French explorer named Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville. And what they were looking for was a controlling point of the mouth of the Mississippi River.
Fort Maurepas was built by the French on Ship Island. The island was occupied by 80 men to help further the exploration of the coast, but the conditions were unfavorable, and by 1701 the French had to relocate. In 1861, Mississippi seceded from the U.S. and the Civil War had begun. On December 31, 1861, Biloxi surrendered to Union naval forces who were operating from Ship Island, where they had built Fort Maurepas. Up until the Civil Rights Movement, the beaches were white only in Biloxi. African Americans began to protest that everyone should be allowed to use these public beaches.
I'm standing here where the Biloxi wade-ins occurred in the late 1950s, early 1960s. Because of these protests, anybody of any race can now be on these public beaches.
Rip Daniels, who grew up in Biloxi during the wade-ins, was just a young boy when the wade-ins occurred, but he remembers it just like it was yesterday.
When I grew up, obviously we were in the middle of Jim Crow, and but I didn't know it as a boy per se until the wade-in.
The Biloxi wade-ins were led by Dr. Gilbert R. Mason, who actually only lived a few minutes away from Daniels' childhood home. Mason's goal was to desegregate the beaches. African Americans would get arrested on charges of trespassing whenever they went to the beach. This is what caused Mason and others to protest. Throughout the 1960s, tourism grew, but in 2005, Katrina left the coast devastated and killed 126 people. The coast and the state had to band together to get back to where it was before.
Here in Mississippi, people were helping each other, people were compassionate, people were looking to the next day and how they could start rebuilding and continue rebuilding our ways of life.
12 years later, the coast is still dealing with the impact of Katrina, but now a new coast is emerging.
Yes, we have casino gaming, but we have deep sea fishing, we have freshwater fishing, we have 24 championship golf courses, we have great seafood restaurants, the 300 years of history and the historic sites around our city, and the friendly people.
To understand the beginning of Mississippi, you must first understand the founding of Natchez and later Vicksburg. Founded in 1716, Natchez was the birthplace of the state, predating Jackson by more than a century.
The city of Natchez is the oldest continuous settlement along the entire length of the Mississippi. People of African descent were contributing to the establishment of the culture and the economy, which led the city of Natchez, its financial heyday, to be the equivalent most of today's Bel Air. There were more millionaires here per capita to be found anywhere else in the nation. First, let's look back at the history of the young nation. Prior to the Louisiana Purchase in the early 1800s, Natchez was the southwestern border to U.S. territory.
I'm standing here in front of Fort Rosalie, which was the settlement place and the governmental center for Natchez, Mississippi in 1716 when it was founded by the French.
The nation was established on an industrial and agricultural foundation. The North needed the raw materials being produced in the South to keep the textile mills and plants operating. The northern bankers and capitalists living in the Natchez region helped to fuel the nation's economy, and because of those relationships, Natchez was spared direct involvement with any of the major battles of the Civil War.
The city of Vicksburg has long historical roots. Today Vicksburg is known for its legacy in the Civil War, but this city has a legacy that stretches beyond just 1863 and the confrontation that happened here. The main economic drive behind this area was, of course, the Mississippi River, and General Grant very quickly realized the only way to take Vicksburg was to lay siege, and siege can be brutal. Pemberton was able to negotiate a little bit, and he did not get an unconditional surrender from Grant. He got a very lenient surrender terms, and not very many generals can say that either of dealing with General Grant.
Once the Mississippi River fell, there was no turning back. It was only a matter of time before the war ended. Vicksburg was in shambles, the roads were ripped up, the trees uprooted, thousands of dead needed burying, and the male population was vastly depleted. The economy was unstable as Vicksburg turned into a Union-occupied city in the middle of the Confederacy.
A lot of the issues we're facing in our society today can be traced back to the Civil War, and we want to be a place where we can have those conversations, where the community feels welcome to learn their history, learn their heritage, but to find their own meaning in this place and to be able to connect what's happening today with what happened in the past.
Southeast Mississippi is known for its piney woods, Civil War history, and rich agriculture. November 1862. Newton Knight and his friend Jasper Collins deserted the Confederate Army. It would be after the fall of Vicksburg that Newt would return to Jones County. He gathered up 125 men and formed the Knight Company.
The early months of 1864, the Knight Company is basically in control of Jones County. In the official records of the War of the Rebellion, in March of 1864, General Leonidas Pope, who was the commander of this district for the Confederate Army, he writes a letter to Jefferson Davis, and he says that Jones County is in open rebellion. Another one said, they have even gone so far as to raise the flag of the United States over the courthouse in Ellisville. You know, that tells me that the deserters are pretty much in control of the county.
Right behind me is the Jones County Courthouse, where Union leader Newton Knight led 125 of his men to this very courthouse and raised the American flag, claiming Jones County as the Free State of Jones. June 1964. Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney were about to head to Longdale, Mississippi to talk to the congregation of Mount Zion Methodist Church after learning that members of the Ku Klux Klan had burned down the church. They were completely unaware of the tragedy that would soon strike. Their bodies were buried in a dam on Burridge's Old Jolly Farm, a few miles southwest of Philadelphia, Mississippi. The news of the civil rights workers' death sparked outrage amongst Americans.
More importantly, for many African Americans, the message is, okay, many of these black people have been getting killed, and the federal government has just kind of said, well, we can't do much because Mississippi is the way it is, and we just kind of got to let those folk in Mississippi do what they do. But once 2 whites were killed, the federal government comes in, and many people feel like this is a direct contradiction to the fact that there hasn't been any real aggressive concern on the federal government's part up until the loss of life by 2 whites. For the state of Mississippi, it was almost like, well, yeah, that's true, but we're trying to illustrate to the rest of the country that there has been some change in the state, and there has been some progress. The makeup of the juries are different, and that the fact that they are prosecuted illustrates that Mississippi is at least trying. So give us some credit.
Hi, I'm Madison Amon, and I'm here in Money, Mississippi at Bryant's Grocery, where the 14-year-old Chicago boy, Emmett Till, allegedly wolf-whistled a shop owner, Carolyn Bryant. Emmett Till was later abducted and murdered by Bryant's husband. This event led to international attention and continued to change the civil rights history in America.
The Mississippi Delta is well known for its rich history of blues music. However, while this region is recognized for its musicians, historically, the lyrics behind their songs are often those of heartache and struggle, tracing back to the roots of slavery and its effects on the Delta. Slavery's impact on racism in America has continued over the centuries. A heightened response to this was seen in Money, Mississippi on August 28, 1955, when a young boy was lynched.
Emmett Till is killed in August of 1955 because he goes in the store and he gets out of his space as an African-American male by crossing the line with a white woman, Carolyn Bryant. From what we've been able to kind of ascertain, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam are made aware of what transpired. So they've decided something's got to be done.
This is Mose Wright. I am the uncle of Emmett Louis Till. Sunday morning about 2:30, someone called at the door. And I said, who is it? And he said, this is Mr. Bryant. I want to talk with you and the boy. And he said, I want the boy that done all that talk. And then marched him to the car, and they asked someone there, was this is the right boy? And the answer was, yes. And they drove toward Money.
They shoot him in the head, throw his body in the Tallahatchie River after putting a cotton gin fan around his neck. All of this goes out that he's been abducted, they find his body, and then now all of the legal aspects of this case began to now percolate.
The trial of Milam and Bryant was a quick one. After deliberating for a little under an hour, the jury exonerated both men, a decision that continues to haunt Mississippi to the present day. The aftermath of events such as these from the civil rights movement are still seen today. While tourism to the Upper Delta is popular, the dark past still seeps through to the music and landscape of the Upper Delta. This has been Madison Amon reporting.
The story of Northeast Mississippi begins as early as 1830 in Columbus, Mississippi. However, it can go back even further in Lowndes County. At one point during the Civil War, Columbus was briefly used as a meeting place for Confederates after Jackson's burning. Columbus served more as a hub for hospital recovery, had an arsenal, and even distributed food to soldiers.
It is said that Jefferson Davis once said that there are two cities that the Confederacy needs to hold and maintain in order for the Confederacy to survive. And one is Richmond, capital city, but the other is Corinth.
During the Battle of Iuka, however, the Confederates' battle against the Union proved unsuccessful. The Confederates would soon try to secure Corinth in 1862 during the Battle of Corinth. The University of Mississippi's involvement in the Civil War is also noteworthy with the creation of the University Greys, a group of students fighting for the Confederacy. I'm here at the Lyceum where the University Greys were hospitalized and nursed back to health after their involvement in the Civil War. However, the University of Mississippi not only plays a central part in the Civil War, but civil rights as well. After 1954's Brown v. Board decision to integrate public schools, James Meredith soon begins to write his application to the University of Mississippi, declaring it as his divine responsibility.
When students come back from a football game in Jackson between University of Mississippi and Kentucky, where Barnett had been whipping people up and basically saying that I'm not going to let him in our school and we're going to remain white and segregated.
I love Mississippi. I love her people.
I love Mississippi. I love her people. I love her customs was this kind of climax to this speech. The students began to trickle back on campus. They began to see these marshals around the Lyceum, and so they began to feel like they'd been duped.
Students and others began to harass the marshals until everything begins to take a more violent turn.
As it began to get darker, it began to be a lot more aggressive. The marshals had to use tear gas. Eventually, of course, gunshots began to ring out.
The Ole Miss riot of 1962 caused hundreds of injuries towards students, the U.S. Marshals, and 2 deaths.
In a lot of ways, some people look at this as though it's the last battle of the Civil War, that it kind of extended all the way into the 20th century.
Attending his first class in American history in Bondurant Hall also has interesting symmetry to these events.
There's some irony there, maybe there, as God is, illustrating that, got a sense of humor to make him go to American history while he's making it.
One could call it irony, but perhaps others would refer to it as a divine calling.
The first capital of Mississippi was founded outside of Natchez in a place called Washington, where the Mississippi River was used as a hub for trade and commerce.
The state of Mississippi wanted to relocate the capital from the southeast to a more centralized location, so Jackson was chosen.
I'm standing here in front of the Pearl River, which was used as a major means of transportation during the Civil War. To this day, the Pearl River remains a vital part of Mississippi's ecosystem.
We could get things, Pearl River, and it being in the center of the state, so Jackson had to be controlled, and then you could stagnate the movement of goods, services, other support for Civil War troops, especially the Southerners.
During the Civil War, Jackson was surrounded by the Union, with much of their supplies being cut off from civilians. With no other use for the capital, the Union burned down the town.
It's the same idea to bring the Confederacy to its knees, cut off its line of supplies.
Even though Jackson was not a necessary territory during the Civil War, it was a major setting for the civil rights movement as Medgar Evers returned from World War II and becomes a major voice in the civil rights.
An NAACP meeting took place, looking for a volunteer to come in and potentially perhaps integrate the University of Mississippi. He raised his hand at this meeting. He sent in an application to the University of Mississippi, wanted to go to law school, wanted to be a lawyer. They brought him to Oxford, interviewed him, tried to categorize him as though he was crazy.
On June 12, 1963, Byron De La Beckwith, who hid in the bushes across the street from Evers' home, gunned him down in the presence of Evers' children.
Really, his death, in a lot of ways, will facilitate a fundamental change in the state of Mississippi because 64 Civil Rights Act eventually be passed, the 65 Voting Rights Act. Mississippi will begin to kind of fundamentally change in terms of African Americans getting some basic kind of constitutional rights.
Although its past is not perfect, the schools, hospitals, and many businesses have helped turn this city into the thriving place we see today, all thanks to the relocation of this state's capital.
If the state capital was not in Jackson, I think this town would have crumbled.